Well, is it the ultimate act of compassion, or is it just playing God? For the second time in 3 years, New Jersey lawmakers considering a bill that would allow for physician-assisted suicide in New Jersey. The bill would only okay it for terminal patients with fewer than 6 months to live. It would require a patient to make 2 requests, 15 days apart, and patients would have to administer lethal drugs without any assistance, including from a doctor. To give you an idea where the public pulse on this is, a recent poll from Fairleigh Dickinson has a majority of New Jersey residents who support assisted suicide. Now, if it passes, New Jersey would become just the 5th state to legalize the procedure, including Oregon, Vermont, Washington State, and Montana. Now, there are valid arguments on both sides of the issue. Opponents of assisted suicide, they point to a case in Oregon where a man took the prescribed doses of lethal drugs but was only knocked unconscious for 65 hours and later awoke from his quote-unquote suicide. Supporters, though, of it cite the first ever case in Oregon where a woman in her mid-80s had been battling breast cancer for 22 years. In a tape played before her death, the woman said, "I will be relieved of all the stresses that I have." And listen, we've all know people, even through our families, have seen loved ones go through a pain, and some of us have even seen them struggle, and many people say that isn't the way they wanted to go, or that's not who the person was that I remembered for their whole life, and they shouldn't have to die with such extreme pain or be so medicated by the end, you know, that they're a shell of who they were. But I'll ask you both, let's start with you, Andrew. If you were going to vote, if you were in the legislature, forget the politics of what chamber it would make it out of, is this playing God or is this compassion?
I side mostly on the compassionate side. I have some concerns, though. We've all heard of cases where there's custody disputes or do not resuscitate disputes where it goes to the courts and there's the families, half the family says one thing, half the family says something else. Or look at, golly, the death of Casey Kasem, the DJ, where there's such a big fight and just whether he was the last months of his life, whether he was actually making decisions. So if there's a way to remedy that or to make sure that that doesn't pop up as an issue, or so that you don't wind up where somebody's wishes are actually not being filled because of that kind of fighting, that's my biggest concern. But if there's a way to either avoid that or work past that, I'm for letting people decide for themselves on something like this.
I would certainly, Richard, support this bill. I've never understood the argument against it. I mean, I understand it, but it seems like they've gone through all the preliminaries to make sure that they've covered everything, where the person has to be of conscious mind themselves to make this type of decision. And as you just reported, the request has to be done 15 days apart. So there's a time. I just see this.
Multiple physicians have to
and multiple
same diagnosis. This is an unrecoverable terminal illness with less than 6 months.
But I want to ask you a question. Explain this to me. If I'm told by the doctors I have, God forbid, I have a few months left to live, that I have terminal cancer, and that I'm going to go in less than 6 months, and if I decide I'm so medicated that I'm miserable and I just want this to be over and done with, what's wrong with that?
I agree with you. I just know, and I can appreciate the argument. I happen to agree with both of you that I think it's compassion, especially with the safeguards put in. But there are people who I respect who say, wait a second, now you're deciding who lives and dies, and actually the person's deciding. But if you believe, and it's a crime to commit suicide in this country, I mean, we can argue about how practical that really is, but it's literally a crime if you try and take your own life, that who is to decide? For the very reasons Andrew mentioned here, that it's potentially rife with abuse. But I really think if people read it carefully, there's so many safeguards in this thing. Multiple doctors have to come to the same consensus for a diagnosis. You have to do it over staggered periods of time.
But are there too many safeguards? I mean, if you...
I also think the idea that you would have to administer it yourself, I mean, that's also self-selecting how ill a person could be. Some of them can't, you know?
I mean, God forbid you were diagnosed with this and you could see a dismal future for yourself, and you indicated, okay, I would like to at some point be able to not burden my family with this, and then you get to a point where you're incapacitated or where you're not able to make those requests within 15 days. I wonder if there should be a difference there.
I think everyone was so scared by Dr. Kevorkian, the whole thing about it, that nobody ever wanted the docs to get involved because of the Hippocratic Oath also, which said, do no harm, right? taking on life is doing harm, but we all know what's going on. There's an unspoken thing about people will intentionally leave out the medication on the nightstand to assist that person to do it, we have DNRs right now, which is its own form of assisted suicide, if you will, I guess. There's distinctions with a difference, and I'm not simplifying. I certainly respect and appreciate people's opinions on this, but I wish New Jersey at least brought it up for a full vote here. Politically, it may be dangerous, but I think New Jersey residents at least deserved a full vote on it. And please, make your opinion heard here. I know a lot of you have personal stories with this, and if you would like to share it with us, we'd really appreciate that. Death with Dignity. Do you believe in physician-assisted suicide? You can sound off on Twitter or Facebook. All right, coming up next here, there actually was movement in Washington for once on something. We will head to our nation's capital where the feds finally taking action to overhaul a VA hospital system riddled with problems. Are the new steps enough to make a difference for hundreds of thousands of vets awaiting the proper care? We'll tell you when we come back.